about their investigation into the deaths of actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa. They say that Hackman died of heart disease and his wife Betsy Arakawa died of a rare infectious disease. The world was shocked when Hollywood star Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa were found dead in their Santa Fe home weeks after they had died. As the police dig deeper, they find strange signs that someone knew about their deaths before anyone else. Hackman's daughter, Leslie Ann, is now the center of attention. Was she involved with something big? How far did she go to hide the truth? The answers might shock you. The shocking deaths of actor Gene Hackman and his wife were found in their Santa Fe home on Wednesday after a neighbor called the police. There was silence in the house, and the door was barely open. Mail had been left outside for weeks without being touched by anyone, so someone in the neighborhood knew something wasn't right and called the police. Officers showed up to check on expecting the normal. They found something very strange inside Gene Hackman's body. He was slouched over in a way that didn't make sense, and his shades were lying next to him as if they had just fallen off his hands. Betsy Arakawa's body was found in the bathroom. There were pills all over the counter, and the water in the sink had dried out, leaving behind a thin film. There was no blood or breaking in there, and there were no signs of a fight. Around the house while the other was dead in its box. There was a problem, though. The bodies weren't brand new. The skin had grown tighter over the bones. The police learned that Gene and Betsy had been dead for weeks. The air inside the house was old and hadn't been moved in a long time. Food that had been out for a long time was sitting on the counter. It felt like time had stopped. The police still had one scary question to ask. How did two people, one of whom was a Hollywood star, get away with it for so long? Investigators found that Gene Hackman's pacemaker had saved the last action he took, which made a lot of things seem different. Gene might have died on February 17. If that's the case, the house has been quiet for at least 9 days with no calls for help, nothing to do, and no one coming in. Something still didn't make sense. Why was Betsy in a different room if Gene had passed out? Why didn't she call for help if she was still alive after he died? More questions were raised. There was a small hole in the door. Had someone been there before the police arrived? Had someone meant for that door to be open? The lab reports showed that there was no carbon monoxide overdose, neither an overdose nor a clear cause of death. There was nothing else to find out about it. Then something new was found that changed the case. Security cameras picked up movement in Gene Hackman's home for weeks before he died, and strange things were happening on the phone. Tracking records with GPS showed some strange patterns before the police arrived. It was strange that the digital trail went straight to the person who knew what happened, Gene Hackman's daughter. The investigation changed its focus because the evidence didn't support what she said. She said she had talked to her dad a few weeks before he died, but the phone records showed otherwise. There were problems with the finances, so the investigators dug deeper and found something even stranger. Gene Hackman's estate documents had been changed before he was found. Before it was even proven that he had died, someone tried to get his money. There was strong evidence that things were going badly with the case. Was Gene Hackman's death really an accident? Or was someone planning something bad long before he was found? The 24-hour special monitoring the timeline of death when police looked at Gene Hackman's pacemaker data, the case took a big turn before going quiet. Investigators looked for signs of life after that date. They looked at his phone records and saw that he didn't make any calls, send any texts, or search the web. They also looked at his bank account information and saw that he hadn't made any purchases with credit cards. It looked like he had just disappeared. Then they found something else. Security cameras on a nearby property caught people moving around outside of Hackman's house. There was a shade nearby. Inside the house, motion sensors picked up on odd behavior at odd times. The front door was never opened, even though someone was looking, but where were they? When the police looked at Hackman's home security system, the logs showed something that wasn't right. Before he died, the bell had been turned off and on several times, but no one had broken in. But something didn't make sense. Every morning, Hackman did the same thing. He took his dogs for a walk, checked his mail, and paid his bills. His life was very routine and easy to plan. Then, all of a sudden, nothing happened. The police looked deeper and found his last digital traces, including his last writing, his last web search, and his most recent call to someone else. All of these ended quickly, with no goodbyes or warning. Then, another clue showed up. Cell tower data showed that there was a strange phone signal near Hackman's house. The number wasn't registered because it kept jumping between towers. Someone knew what happened because the signal showed up the night before Hackman's pacemaker stopped working. Betsy should have called for help if Hackman had been having a medical problem, but she didn't. Why didn't she tell anyone? The police looked at her bank records on February 16 and found only one small trade. It was small and didn't mean much on its own, but now we know it was just a digital footprint afoot. Before everything went dark that day, Hackman and his wife both died. The real question was who had been watching them. Detectives looked for someone who could get into the house and get something. That's when they changed their focus. The records of the spying had raised some questions. They were now going to tell the truth. What did she hide about her daughter's involvement? At first, it wasn't clear who Leslie Ann Hackman was. People were interested in the strange timeline in the surveillance video, but when the police looked deeper, they found something that changed the whole case. They said she had last talked to her dad a few weeks before he died. She said everything seemed fine and there were no signs of worry or strange behavior. But when they looked at call logs, they didn't find any calls, texts, or anything else from her father. The last time they saw or talked to her was a lot longer ago than she said. The facts didn't back up what she said. Investigators looked at her bank records and found they were expecting normal business deals and spending habits, but what they found was strange. She had been talking about her dad's wealth before it was official that he had died. There were legal questions and questions about inheritance at a time when no one outside the family thought Hackman was missing. There were also papers that had been changed that had to do with Hackman's assets. At that point, the police could not ignore the situation. If these changes happened before February 17, they weren't just strange, they were planned. The government started to ask the tough questions. Did she know something that other people didn't? Had she been planning something to happen before it did? What she did raised even more red flags. When the contradictions were pointed out to her, she got defensive. It became less clear what she was saying. She didn't know why there were no records of the calls she said she made, and she couldn't explain the money. Hackman's assets were talked over with a lawyer on the day that his pacemaker recorded its last movement, but no one had publicly said he was dead at that point. He had been missing for so long that no one knew, so why was someone moving things around on his land? The time was getting closer to her. Do you think she knew anything about his last days if she was trying to get his money? Hackman's death wasn't the only thing that was being looked into. It turned into something else. As more evidence was found, it became clear that there was more going on than just a terrible accident. The walls came down and the puzzle pieces began to fit together. Soon, the police would find something that would change the whole case. A secret was about to be revealed, and there would be no turning back once it was known. The autopsy and toxicology reports didn't answer any questions. Instead, they made more Gene Hackman's. Body didn't have any bumps that would show that it had been hurt. There were no broken bones or scars on his body to show that he had been attacked or that something violent had happened. The same was true for Betsy Arakawa's body. There were no marks or signs of a fight or anything else that could have led to foul play. The first idea that the person was poisoned by carbon monoxide was quickly ruled out because the gas lines, air vents, and everything else that could have caused a leak had been checked by the police and found to be fine. There were no signs that the couple had been near anything that could have killed them. Once that idea was thrown out, investigators had to figure out what killed them if it wasn't direct harm or poisoning from the environment. Toxicology reports said, don't take pills, Don't use barbiturates. We saw no signs of an overdose. At least on paper, their systems were clean. Later, though, the police noticed something that didn't make sense. There weren't enough of some medicines that should have been in the house. Gene Hackman had heart problems in the past and had been through medical when the house was searched by police. Those prescriptions weren't found. It wasn't just a case of bottles getting lost. If he ran out of medicine, there should have been proof that he got more, but there wasn't any. If he had stopped taking his pills, there should have been extra pills around the house, but there weren't any. It looked like they were taking away on purpose. This made investigators think of a scary possibility. What if Hackman's death wasn't caused by someone outside of him might have made sure he never got the help he needed? An attack or carelessness can both kill. The autopsy reports show that the same thing could have happened if someone hadn't given him his medicine, stopped medical help, or did nothing to help him get better. It's not a fight or a shock, it's just a slow, inevitable fall. The police then looked at Betsy's pills that were lying around and asked her why she hadn't taken them if she had been having a medical episode. Why didn't she ask for help? Maybe she wasn't strong enough to do anything, or was there something or someone making sure she couldn't? When the medicine went missing, things changed. It showed that someone had a plan rather than an accident. The police weren't just looking into a sad death. The couple's German Shepherd was also found dead in a crate in the bathroom. They were thinking about the possibility of a plan that was well thought out and based on someone who had. The fight over Gene Hackman's estate and the legal drama that followed almost right away. His wealth, built up over decades of success in Hollywood, was now stuck in lawsuits. Even before he died, investigators found strange activity involving his assets, but when they looked at his will, they were shocked to see blank pages. Important information had been changed before Hackman was even officially pronounced dead. Changing the documents was inevitable. The paper trail was full of Leslie Ann Hackman's name. She had been curious about her dad's money for a long time before his body was found. Her lawyers admitted that she had tried to make changes to the estate documents, but wasn't allowed to. However, papers and transactions showed that someone had been planning the transfer of wealth for a while. The police put together the evidence, the will had been looked at, changed, and Hackman was still missing, but it was clear that Leslie Ann was involved. Were they being smart, or did she already know that her father was dead? Legal experts had different opinions on the changes. Some said they were made to get a bigger share of the inheritance, while others thought there was fraud on a large scale. If Leslie Ann was getting ready for her father's death, what else was she getting ready for? The legal battle got worse when the missing pages came to light, revealing financial problems and inheritance claims. There was a clear trail of money, and this wasn't just a story about state rights. It was about lying, greed, and how far someone would go to get rich. When the case went to court, Leslie Ann Hackman wasn't expecting to hear a decision she didn't expect. As the estate battle heated up, Leslie Ann Hackman's shady behavior raised troubling questions. 24-hour surveillance revealed the truth. The study was now mostly about Leslie Ann Hackman. Too many red flags had been raised. Because she was involved in the estate fight, the police needed to know what happened. So they followed her around 24 hours a day and watched all of her phone calls, emails, and financial transactions. What they found made them feel bad. Her bank records showed a story she hadn't told anyone. There were alerts for transactions. Cash had been moved to different banks. There were some withdrawals of too small an amount to be found. It looked like these changes were made at an odd time. There were some things that investigators read private emails and messages sent to lawyers that showed a scary pattern. Leslie Ann had been talking about her estate before it was public knowledge because her father was still alive when she talked to lawyers about estate claims. It was like she had been getting ready for something she knew was going to happen. Phone records with a timeline showed that she had talked to financial experts, moved assets, and as long as everyone thought Gene Hackman was still alive, Leslie Ann tried to move legal proceedings forward. She did things that would only make sense if she was sure her dad wasn't involved anymore. Bank payments that weren't seen were the most damning evidence. A forensic audit showed that huge amounts of money were quietly moved into private accounts. Some of these moves went to offshore banks, which made them harder to track. Leslie Ann had been moving money around for a long time before she should have had access to it. It wasn't just a surveillance footage. Financial records and legal inquiries all pointed to the same conclusion. Lisi and Hackman weren't just a daughter dealing with her grief while running her father's business. They had a well-thought-out plan to make money. The evidence was clear. One person was linked to bank records, surveillance footage, and changed legal papers before her father was even officially pronounced dead. Lisi and Hackman planned a way to make money, and the investigation found a pattern of lying. The police called the police and caught her right away. She was charged and jailed right away. The case went through the court system like a well-thought-out puzzle, with each piece showing how she tried to trick the system: the missing pages from the will, the early land claims, the moves that were not seen. The schedule made it very clear that she had been planning Gene Hackman's death for a long time, even before anyone knew he was dead. Due to the quick verdict, she lost all rights to Hackman's estate. She was found guilty of multiple counts of theft, financial manipulation, and obstruction of justice. Every dollar, every asset, and every official link to her father were taken away, and her name was taken off the inheritance for good. She had based her whole life on a plan that fell apart right in front of her eyes, and now there is nothing left but money and no right to her father's heritage. As the case was over, there were still questions about what really happened in Gene Hackman's last days. Did Lisi and Just take advantage of the chance? The secret lived on, and some people thought the whole truth hadn't been told yet. The truth about Gene Hackman's last days may never be fully known. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the next video that comes up on your screen.